Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show. We're here with my two co-hosts, Senfong Lim and Erica Bayoris, and we have a couple special guests with us, which I'm going to let Sen introduce momentarily so I don't butcher their name. I'm just excited that you're here with us. It's episode 116. We're going to be talking about, obviously, games and design and all that fun stuff. But before we get there, I'm going to pass the mic over to Erica first and say, what have you been up to? What games have you been playing? Any fun stuff the last week or so?
Ooh.
Erica, I wonder if you're muted. Are you? Maybe. If not, I'll go. I'll talk. Haha.
Okay.
So, Erica's popping out. She'll pop back in. So, hey, I've actually never seen my new glasses on screen before. That's weird. That is just kind of strange. But so lately I've just been working on a bunch of games. So I'm working on the development for Big Trouble in Little China some more. And also another game from Everything Epic called Metal Dawn, which is coming out soon, hopefully, and it's by Stephen Avery, the designer. So that's pretty cool. And then working on a bunch of stuff for my own games, some more junk art expansions and Rock Paper Wizards expansions and stuff like that. And then Jesse and I have a bunch of stuff that is, coming to fruition. So talk about it some other time because I don't know how much I can talk about it yet. But Erica, what have you been up to lately?
Okay, can we hear me this time?
Yeah.
Yay! Okay.
Yay.
I'll be really honest. My life is completely consumed by my job and it's super, super boring. So what I would rather really hear about is everyone who went to Essen and what they played. I'm throwing it to the Essen people. So I think that was Bez and Daryl.
Yeah, Bez, give it a shot.
I want to hear about the games.
At Essen itself, I got to play like 3 games that weren't mine or Robert's. Which, yeah, because I was just kind of on my booth the whole time. Like on Thursday, I was at the booth from like 8 o'clock, 8:30 until like 7 o'clock. And then I realized that I had no, yeah, maybe it wasn't so great. And thankfully, Gigamic Party did have some mighty fine sausages. So there you go. But yeah, it was just the first day anyway, and that kept going by pure adrenaline. But thankfully, since Essen, I've had a chance to play all the games that I've magically acquired through trading and stuff. And yeah, on the ferry over with other people from the UK, and on Monday I ended up playing like 5 things. I've played all of Friedman Fries's fast forward games, which are like totally awesome. Fortress is really good. Flea's simple. It's yeah, and and I've got new housemates which are totally into games. So it's like, yeah, play these games.
That's excellent. Funky. And so, what was the big standout from Essen for you, Bez?
Personally, this is going to sound totally biased and narcissistic. Well, it is totally biased. From a narcissistic point of view, the standout at Essen was the Gigamic stand, because they had like 3 great big banners for my game, which was super awesome. From a less biased point of view,
sure.
I think, I don't know, like everything's kind of seen through the filter of your own eyes. And I mean, it was meeting the people and like seeing Friedman Fries and Tim Fowers and Rado and stuff like that. But I mean, that's pretty biased as well, because if you went, maybe you'd get to meet them and maybe not. But I did pretty fun. And yeah, there were games. That was pretty cool.
Who would have thought there was games at Essen?
I know, right?
Who would know?
Oh my God. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Daryl, what about you? What did you see at Essen that really struck you?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously, as everyone knows, a huge fair. The rumor was that there was over 1,000 new games released.
Whoa.
So just to give an idea of the scope that we're talking, I'm just writing down, for instance, a few of the games that I purchased because I only took pictures. But for instance, some of the games that stood out to me that I was very excited about acquiring, things like Agra and News Forward, some kind of chewy, meaty, medium weight games really hitting the market. There were some fun expansions hitting the market. A couple games that I noticed that stood out to me as well are games with minis. So maybe not even games that you would have expected. For instance, there was one there that was a Justice League game that had all the DC characters as minis. From
I'm
a very
stealing
small,
that when he's not
That's
looking.
cool.
yeah, from a very small publisher, and nobody understands how that game was made. I walked USAopoly and a variety of other publishers by there and asked them how this was possible. We are all perplexed.
Do
We're
they only have
hoping that
rights for
person.
Europe?
We have no idea how it worked out. We asked. We got.
Did you ask Cryptozoic?
We asked Cryptozoic. It is not by Cryptozoic.
Oh, I know it's not by Cryptozoic, but
So that was confusing to them as well. A few games that I thought were real standouts. One that I was really proud to get signed by the creator and the artist was Rising 5.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous.
That's Holy Grail games.
Yeah, exactly. Is it Holy Grail or is it Mandu?
Oh, I can't remember, but
I don't know. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah,
but it was stunning and real kind of a surprise game of the fair. Altiplano, the bag puller by the same creators of Orleans. That was it was sold out super fast. I think the first few hours of the show. One thing that I really loved was playing When I Dream.
Oh, I've
by
seen
Reaper.
that.
So fun. They had a really great presence at the show. They had a bunch of people walking around in their pajamas, walking around with pillows and the games and just falling asleep all over the show.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's just super awesome. I really love the advertising there. Obviously, Queen Domino had a wonderful presence with King Domino doing so well. Beyond that, everything comes down to taste, as Bez was saying. What are you into? And sadly, a fair like this, you never have enough time to play the games. You're all over the place trying to talk to people, sell, network, you name it. I actually had the pleasure of basically only getting to sit beside Bez for a few seconds, but we were both at a after-hours media event that Daniel Zayas had organized, and he got way too good of a response because he invited people, and then all of a sudden we took over, I think, a quarter of the restaurant. So we couldn't even talk really to everyone because it was this long table. So
yeah, I hate long tables, man. They're no fun. Long tables are no fun.
So I mean, in the future, I know Daniel Zayas wants to run it again because it was such a great response, but he's going to try to make it more of a mixer or but he was overwhelmed by the fantastic response. Cool. Another highlight for me was getting this hat.
I noticed the hat.
I did notice the new hat too.
I like the hat.
Yeah, I was very happy about getting a Bonk hat.
Did you actually get to play Bonk though?
I did. I got to play a lot of Classic and Bonk because I went to a Scandinavian party.
How is that different than like a Canadian party? Oh, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He's like, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, they run a special party, that's for sure. So I got to gear up for that one next year. Prepare myself.
Or what's perhaps gear down. What is Bonk? Bonk is a game where you have a ball in the middle, like a wooden ball in the middle, and then you have little ramps in all four corners for all the players. Ooh. And they roll little balls down those ramps to knock the other ball, the ball in the middle, into the scoring places.
Was that from the guys who made Class?
It is. Exactly.
Class. Yeah, the makers.
Yeah. I met them at Gen Con, and they mentioned that Sounded really interesting.
Yeah, they had it at Gen Con, just like a few copies. It's really quite cool.
Okay.
It's like almost like how people who use wheelchairs will bowl or do lawn bowling.
Mhm.
They'll use this big ramp thing.
That's a good analogy.
Mm.
And in
right.
general, I would mention that they are incredible at marketing. So, for instance, they had a phenomenal booth at the show, and in general, they did a really fantastic job of spreading the word. They were giving people tattoos, all that kind of fun stuff. So it really went viral, I think, at the show, and they sold a lot of copies.
Yeah, and it's such a good kind of heirloom style game that you would
Mhm.
it will last, right? So you can pass it down to your family, all that kind of stuff. Well, so Essen was awesome, but let's start talking about what we came today to chat about. So I'd like to introduce you guys to the guests. The guests today are Michael Epstein. Michael is a designer. Where are you currently?
I'm in the Boston area in Massachusetts, United States.
Right, but you're looking to move out west.
If I can find a job in Seattle, I would love to go.
Oh, okay. And can you tell us a little bit, Michael, about what's going on in your life right now? Like literally right now.
I'm talking with you. I mean, it's great. um, so right now I am on Kickstarter with a game called Pigment, which is a Renaissance painting game. It's a worker placement game for 2 to 3 players. Takes about 15-20 minutes to play. It's kind of a good little gateway game about art. And that's currently at over 80% funding with 20 days to go. So it's looking like real fun.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Yay, that's great. I will show all the links later, which will be
Thank you.
obviously relevant. The other guest that we have who's already spoken, and you might know him as Bez, but your full name, let me see if I can get this, is Daryl Shahriari. Is that close? Is that pretty good?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Sorry, Bez. I should have confirmed that before. Bez, can you tell us about what you do?
So recently I had Yuki released, which was super cool, and that yeah, like I mentioned, that was like a really big thing at Essen, and apparently they sold out of the German version. It's like a party game of having things like one finger touching nose, one finger touching gear, 2 hands touching, and you still need to draw your next card somehow. Also released every year on 1st of August, I'm self-publishing a new game. So this year it was Meeple, which is a game system with pairs of letters on cards. And I'm super excited by that. It's actually going to be a bunch of my game-making career, because I've promised one new game for the deck every 1st of August, like a solid main game. So in like 6 years, there will be like 12 games plus hundreds of other games by all the other in design on the website, which is being kind of constantly added to and revamped. But
oh, that's neat. So it's a system of cards, and then you're going to make a lot of other games for that? Is that how that's going to work?
yes, exactly. So you've got like 5 games in the box. So like there's a words game, obviously, because it's letters. There's also an abstract game called Alphabetical, which is about how many letters do you can only put things in alphabetical order, but once you've skipped some letters, you can never go back. So if you're unwilling to skip letters, you'll never get anything, probably, drafting. But if you're willing to skip too many, then you'll have skipped too many and you won't be able to put in any future things. So it's kind of balancing those 2 aspects. And then you've got a storytelling activity, a party thing of reverse acronyms. You've got like Couple, which is the new game for this year, which is like really long words together. And yeah, you've got something else, which I think, Grabble, which is actually my favorite, where you're just grabbing cards as quickly as you can and making sure they match a border or the letter.
Very cool, very cool.
To me, and my game for next year, 1st of August 2018, is going to be Kitty Cataclysm.
I like the name. That's awesome.
Thank you. And at Essen, I was getting hundreds of people to draw cats, and I ended up 88 or something around those lines, which was cool.
Oh, I saw the pictures of the cats for some reason. I think, were you posting them or were you talking about
Yeah,
them? Okay, and so that's what they're for. Oh, very neat. Okay. That's a great way to do
well,
that.
it's just because, people like drawing cats, and maybe sometimes people don't get enough opportunities to draw cats. And it's like, you go into a show, I mean, like, it's stressing, and let's face it, you weren't expecting to draw anything unless you were playing a drawing game. But let's in a relaxed, non-competitive manner, and all the cats are equally valid, and you just get a freebie for drawing a cat, and it goes up in the wall. Gold
I like
star
that.
for you.
That's it, dude.
Yeah.
Everyone just needs to draw a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember at Gen Con this year, there was a designer, Matt Fantastic, who was having everyone draw themselves
Raccoons?
as raccoons. Yeah.
Raccoons.
I just drew a raccoon at Essen.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
nice.
just
on
late
the
to the
Gen
game
Con.
there, buddy.
I think I
Yeah.
did one for
Yeah.
him at Gen Con.
I did one at Gen Con where I was juggling meeples and dice and stuff.
I did one at Origins because it was late.
Because Sen's always first.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Shortest person in line starts. There we go. Look at the tallest. Erica, you got some questions.
Yeah, I wanted to learn a little bit more about Michael because we heard some great stuff about Bez already. Michael, so this is everyone kind of wants to know these questions.
Mhm.
How did you get into gaming? Where did the game design bug come from?
So the game design bug came many years after the game playing bug. I started out playing video games in elementary school. I got my first Game Boy in first grade with Super Mario Land, which I still have. And from there, like I was a kid. I played like Candyland. I played Monopoly. I played Scrabble. But I considered myself a video gamer all through high school. However, there was one game that I did design in junior year of high school. It was a game featuring me and my friends from the swordsmanship club that we had on campus, basically just beating each other up with boffer swords. And I made a game that was kind of like a beat 'em up type game featuring us with all sorts of little in-jokes and whatnot. Had that laminated, and we played around, and it took forever, and it wasn't very balanced, and people were kind of like by the end of it. But that was the first game I really designed. And then after high school, all through high school, I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to go to culinary school. I wanted to make food for people and make them happy through food. I mean, I still want to make people happy. That's partly why I make games, which are so fun. But I definitely did not expect culinary school to be so stressful. I was in a rough place in my life socially, and by the end of October of my freshman year at Johnson & Wales, I withdrew and was like, this is probably not for me. So after that, I was really depressed. But I went back to the swordsmanship group, and one of them invited me to play Dungeons and Dragons. And that's kind of how I got into the tabletop side of things, like really into the tabletop side of things through D&D 3.5. I had another friend at the time who had just heard of this new game called Dominion, and so we picked that up and played a few rounds and figured out how deck builders worked. And it was through D&D that I kind of started forming more social connections, rebuilding my self-confidence after culinary school, and really felt part of a community. So from there, I just was like, how can I give back to this community? And I realized that I wanted to make games. So there we are.
Yeah, very cool. Appreciate that, Michael. And we're going to circle back with some more questions for sure. But before we do, I want to ask kind of a similar question to Bez. What was kind of your inspiration for getting involved with games? What's your backstory? and what role do games play in your life now?
Well, I started. My first memory is like literally before I could walk, of a Spectrum loading screen. I don't know if any of you guys know it's Tish computer.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the spec? Okay, cool. So this is the ZX Spectrum. My brothers used to have this, where you had the actual tape cassettes, audio tapes, and then you'd stick it in, and then it would go around. And so at the time, I'd seen TVs before. I kind of vaguely knew what they were, although I didn't really have even words at the time. And so put this squarish thing into another squarish thing, and then the magical lights box flickered up, and there were lines coming down, and then it was
that is actually legit what happens.
Yeah, and kind of like a modem noise, if anyone watching's old enough for old modems. But yeah, so they had a drawing package, and it was just kind of the sorts of seeing them interact with something. It made my mind go, wow, you can totally do like anything in this new world, and that's super amazing. I got super into video games. I had like a SNES, and then I kind of came about it through there. Like I actually went to uni, for which you guys call college in the US, to actually get into designing and working on video games. But then, yeah, after uni, things didn't work out as I'd planned. I was super into Go, like the ancient Chinese board game. And then I met a Go group at a different university, started playing with them, got into Euro games. I was like, oh, I enjoy these. And it was kind of just natural that I would try to make them. And in fact, I tried my hand at making, games with decks of cards, because it was more like people would say, oh, if you're trying to make video games, you really should, as a design challenge, make games using just a deck of playing cards. And then I was like, this is fun. And then it's like just really nice, kind of, because I don't know, have you guys played Saturn Bomberman?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, like having like 10 people, or I think I only had the multi-tap for 7, but that was super awesome. Like having so many people sitting down, playing on one screen. We don't really get that anymore, which is a shame. But then with, traditional board games now, or not traditional, like modern board games, also it's like just a really shared experience. And like, last year at Essen, Tifa Taschen, shout out to Fabian, who I only know because I traded with the designer. That's a super awesome game. And it's like just, modern board games are so much about, yeah, they can be about interacting with the system, but even so, they're more about interacting with the other people. There's so much enjoyment about that. And it was just like, yeah, I want to make these, and I want to add more to the world, and yeah, try and make something that other people might not be making. And yeah, I got into it, and in a bind, some people enjoyed, and it's been picked up, and I'm hopefully continuing to make things that, yeah, hopefully other people might not have made. That's my kind of, to make things that maybe might not have been made if I weren't around.
Excellent.
Nice.
Very cool, very cool. Michael, we're going to come back to you.
Okay.
So the title of this episode is really, dealing with the cards that you're dealt. And I wanted to talk to you specifically about, your experience coming into game design from a time in your life where things weren't going so great. How does adversity and game design, what's the intersection for you, and how do you get past adversity? Do you use game design as a way to work through that? Does it come out in your designs? Is it something that you've been using over the course of your life almost as a therapeutic outlet for you? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that last one really hits on it. Games for me have always been kind of an escapist mechanism where, like, I've always been overweight. I've always been socially awkward. But in a game like Lords of Waterdeep, for instance, that doesn't really matter. In a game like chess, that doesn't matter. In a game like even Scrabble, being brainy instead of brawny is actually an asset. So I think games really drew me in with that. But then examining how modern gaming especially does exactly what Bez said, and it's not just interacting with the systems anymore, but it's interacting with people through a system. I think that's really been a good way for me to learn more about myself, more about how I think, how I work, and how I play. And thus, I can leverage that into how I design games.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was actually going to throw something similar to Bez, kind of looking at the idea. Do you think of design as being an outlet for you, or or do you actually look at it more like almost like a play space to escape in? Like, which one is it? Sort of, is it to disconnect, or is it to try to kind of release, whatever's going on in your life?
I'd say for me, it's more like a play space, like kind of being. I mean, I love it, especially with video games. I know this is obviously about board games, but we control lots of analog, so I hope that's okay to kind of go in all the peripheral directions. So, like with video games, my favorite thing was we kind of abstract games where as soon as you change one rule in the code, you've got a framework, everything's falling down. Let's say a typical click on stuff, get rid of stuff, other stuff falls down. If you change like one line, then everything changes as a kind of emergent dynamic because of that. And it's so beautiful when you've got something like Go. And actually, I played PLOS with another designer who traded me a copy of that, which is also published by Gigamic. And what I love about that game is, there's balls, and balls from the board is kind of how you win. But having your ball at the top of the pyramid, is the objective. But actually, by removing your balls, you're giving yourself more balls for later. And you don't win your first playing. It's like, wait, how does that help me win? That's how it. And it's kind of all these things that you only understand through playing. And I think, once you've got a framework, you kind of play differently. And I think, what Michael was saying about it doesn't matter who you are. And to some degree, especially when you're playtesting with other people who are also designers, and it's like, what, am I allowed? Kind of when things are a bit naff, and it's like kind of, this is an absolutely dire idea. And sometimes I've even brought things knowing, this is probably going to be terrible, but that's okay because there's so much acceptance when you're at that kind of designer environment. And everyone's just like, let's work on this project together. And I think that's beautiful. It's such a supportive and collaborative process. Like with video games, you could in theory make something totally on your own. A board game, you've really got to playtest it with other people. Mm-hmm. And so, I guess for me, it is primarily a play space. I can't say, I need to get this thing out. It's just like, I could, to be honest, be expressing myself in so many ways, but it's just so much fun. And
excellent. Michael, you had a point?
Yeah, so on that idea of expression and the play space, that really is the core of the games that I design. Most of my games do draw on my interests and things that I want to be experimenting with, things that I'm passionate about, namely art. My sister is an amazing artist. My mom's a quilter and a knitter, and So I've been surrounded by art and crafts my whole life, and because of that, like, there's something that I'm passionate about. But since I'm not a very good artist myself, I tend to, as shown here, make games that are really about that creative process and the structures surrounding that creative process. So Pigment is about getting the paints you need, while denying them to the other players. Tattoo the Game of Ink, which is another game that I designed, is a game that really was designed to showcase the talent of tattoo artists, because I love that form of art, but I could never do it myself. So it's definitely a way to play around in those worlds from the outside, but still like bring your own passion into it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You wanted to ask something to Michael?
I was just going to ask, like, with the tattoo stuff, I'd heard a wee bit about a world you're really interested in. Like, have you got tats yourself?
No, I actually don't. I live vicariously through my game, because I had promised my grandmother that I would not get a tattoo, and so I can't until she dies. Nothing personal, but like, I would love to have a piece of art that I identify with so much that I would want it on my body. But on the other hand, I also recognize that I don't have the money right now for it. So there's many different obstacles to getting one. However, in making Tattoo the Game of Ink, I met so many great tattoo artists, and there's just so much great art that I've learned and seen just in this world that I would just be honored to let any of them work on me.
Very cool. Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
must now have a list of things that you'll want to get done later in life, much
Tiger's
later.
ID 20.
Yeah, we want grandma around for long haul, but
Yeah, she's great.
that opportunity is. But I kind of I'm guessing probably family might be one of the answers to this, but I'm curious. You've mentioned kind of the process of making games, Michael, and how that has been a great escape and a way for you to share your passions in a creative outlet. I'm curious, how do you go about the process of designing, play testing, and making a game? What are some of the things that keep you going forward? What's some of the ways? Because as game designers, we do hear a lot of negative feedback, or there might be lots of reasons why designers want to quit on a game. Are there any tips or suggestions or people or resources that you turn to inspire and keep you encouraged as you go through the process?
So I've made many games, many of which have never seen the light of day outside of like 3 people. Mainly because you've just got to keep making and making and making and creating and creating and creating, because otherwise you'll never discover what that next great game will be. I also recommend to anyone who's struggling with games, sit down and play something. Recently, I played Clank for the first time, and I loved it for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was they solved a problem that I've been working on, and they solved it in an interesting way that inspired me to not necessarily copy them, but to like go around the problem in an interesting way. So definitely keep playing games.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great to be inspired by other people's mechanics, and what would you do with them if you had a chance?
Exactly.
Yeah, and get to play in their little sandboxes and whatnot.
Yeah, that's nice.
Bez, we have a question from Paul Saxberg of Ruxley Games. That's his actual whole title. That's funny. He asks, "Is when you have a crisis in your life, does that make you re-examine your priorities, especially around game design? Does that actually make you want to design games more when you're in crisis, or do you have to reprioritize and then say, game design is on the side? What do you think, Baz?"
I don't know, like, in a way, one super awesome, I feel like yeah, it just sounds, I don't know, a bit egotistical to say, yeah, I'm a creative person, because it's like, oh, and other people aren't. I mean, what kind of label is that to apply? But yeah, I just feel like I really want to have something out there to represent me. Like, I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm probably not going to have kids, for various reasons I'm not going to get into.
Of course.
And everybody want to have a bit of a legacy in a way, and something that they can sort of, yeah, bring into the world. And I guess for me, like what Michael was talking about, like with food, making people happy through food, and it's the same through games, kind of trying to bring something into the world so that other people are like, yeah, we've had fun with this. And like, I mean, like, there was someone at Essen who was like, oh, I love the cats, and like kind of shaking my hand and thanking me a few times. And there were a couple of people saying, oh, we love In a Bind, and it's brought so much joy. And like, that's exactly what I want. It's not about, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of ego involved. Like, I want people to have fun in the world, but I also want it to be because of me in a way. Because, I mean, otherwise, if you didn't, you'd just be like, yeah, I'm not doing anything with my life. I'm just going to sit here and do absolutely nothing. But it's like, yeah, you can't do that. And to be honest, it's kind of like a thing that kind of getting to the point of the card are dealt. It's a way to give your life purpose. Because I don't know if you guys have heard of the 24-hour comic.
No. Tell us about it.
Invented by who, and Google him. He's
yeah, of course.
So, but 24-hour comic, 24 hours, you got to do page 24 comic that's 24 pages long. And then there's a person called Ryan Estrada who tried to make a 48-hour comic and didn't quite manage it, and then did a 72-hour comic, which was super awesome. Notion Stammy. This was back in 2005. And then he went over to help. I was in a job, and then I did a 100-hour comic. I raised a wee bits of money like for that, and then I actually flew over and then helped with some kind of painting of boats and digging of stuff and kind of manual labor, and then kind of also just some tourism about that area. But the point is, like, when I was doing that 100-hour comic, it was kind of like, yeah, this is really worthwhile, because it's kind of, you've got that sense of, this is what I'm doing. And sometimes if you've had trouble finding work, if you're unemployed, it's kind of like, yeah, what the hell am I doing with my life? What am I all about? And making a game, it gives you purpose, especially when even if you've play tested it. And I've done a couple of kind of talks about board game design, and I think the number one thing is whatever you want to do is totally valid, because it's not about selling necessarily 5,000 or 1,000 or even like 100 copies. I mean, if you want, I've seen people who've made a game for like, and it's one copy, that is all that will ever be made, and it's that one copy for them and their friends, and that's a totally valid and wonderful thing. And having like, oh, this is a game I'm making for someone in my life, because it's kind of like cribbage, but it's all about dogs, that, you know, makes them happy, and that gives you a sense of purpose. And it's kind of finding that purpose, whether you're doing it for however big an audience, however small an audience. Obviously, the smaller it is, you're probably more likely to be closer to them in your life. But yeah, I think that if you've got a crisis, you need a sense of purpose. You need to be like, what am I doing? And so game design, any creative outlet that you can find and to throw yourself into is fantastic. And sometimes you need that release, because you can't just be beating yourself up 24/7 and saying, this is bad. And you can't be, yeah, you've got to sometimes give yourself a break and just work on things. And I think that's amazing. And whether it's board game design or dancing or, you know, crocheting, or what's the thing you said your family does, Michael?
Knitting, sewing, and my sister does all sorts of great digital art and other fine art.
Yeah, and there you go. And it's like all kind of making new things in the world. And I think it's amazing kind of how we can do that.
I think the beautiful.
Oh, sorry. There. I designed the quilt that's on my bed, actually. So like I've done a little quilt myself. Yeah.
That's really nice.
Thank you.
Well, I think both of you are bringing up a really great topic and kind of stems out almost like what our theme was, but this almost like art as being therapy is kind of a way to heal yourself, or just find a way, as Bez was saying, just to channel everything you're feeling in one direction, right? And I think, Michael, you've been kind of talking in different ways around that as well. So I was going to combine a little bit with a question from Paul's continued question from the chat. He was kind of talking about design for giving you meaning, giving your life meaning through design, especially when things are getting maybe failing or negative. Or do you find when things are going bad or when things are falling apart, is that how you channel yourself, or do you find that becomes frustrating too?
I think it's definitely one way I channel myself. I'm definitely a person who tends to get very bullheaded in terms of how I go about things. That's just a personality quirk of mine. I will follow a path to its end before trying any other options, which has caused some problems. But on the other hand, it does let me learn everything I can about something before I move on. And I think in games that really has come through in how I design. But I tend to, like for Pigment, for example, it came out of wanting to make a game that was like Lords of Waterdeep, but much, much shorter. Lords of Waterdeep is a great game, but it can take a long time. And I wanted to kind of capture that worker placement feel in a very short game. So I made a game. I just basically made an entirely polished game. It was awful. And so in that failure of not really having a great success with that, I did think about it. I did think about my creative process in doing that. And I just backed off and tried a different path. And that one worked okay. And then I backed off, tried a different path. That one worked great. That was Pigment. But also, like, for giving my life meaning, I definitely do identify myself as a game designer. That is who I consider myself. I am someone who makes things that people play with and that brings them joy in social settings. And so it's definitely something that is a core tenet of myself. Like, I play games, I make games. Those are the two big things in my life, the two big pillars, which kind of are one big pillar together. It's all games, which is not really advisable usually. Simply because if that pillar goes away, who am I then? But for me, it works because I do go straight ahead on that. I do tend to make a game, and then if it's not working, I'll back off, make a different game, then back off, make a different game. And that's why I've got so many game designs in varying stages of development. I think at last count I'm up to 8 right now, including Pigment, which is kickstarting. It's probably too many.
No, there's no such thing as too many.
Never too many. Never too many. You're talking to all the people that make too many games. So.
Yeah, literally all the people.
Is the problem. All at once.
Yeah.
We all have that same problem.
Yeah.
We should support.
Well, Bez, I want to ask a question from Joseph Kell, who's watching live with us. And he asked the question, with so much going on in life, how do you find time to start a new design? We're talking about juggling so many games. How do you do time management? How do you find the time to make games?
Okay.
And play them.
And play them. Okay, playing published games can be a bit trickier. Like, I'm super privileged and super thankful that recently we've had some shuffling going on in my house. And Nicole and Alice, like, one of the prerequisites when you came in for your interview, you had to play a couple of my games, Yogi and Wibble, and you had to play Battle Sheep. And then, so, yeah, we kind of saw, are you open to gaming? What kind of gamer are you? You know, if you're picking on someone. But, yeah, that helps a lot, just having similarly minded people in your life. Living in London helps a lot, because in London it's a big city, and frankly, whatever you want to do here, you're probably going to find it with. When I was in Glasgow, yeah, I was a couple kinds of gaming groups going on per week, and I was trying to start up like a new monthly group, which was because one of the groups was kind of more RPGs, minis games, one of them was more Euro. I wanted to start up one which was more just for fillers, if you know what I mean. And then it would be like once a month. But even that, it was meant to be me and another host, and then I went away for like 2 months on an extended holiday, and then came back, and it had pretty much gone from like 13 members, which was okay. It was slowly growing back down to like 4 members, and I was like, well, this is never going to sustain itself, which is a bit sad. But then in London, when I came down to London, I searched for board games, and there's London on Board, which at the time was meeting about 4 times a week, which is crazy if you think about it. And now it's meeting like about 6 times a week. Yeah, Playtest UK. Not only was there something like that, but there was also Playtest UK already established, and that was going once a month. Now I kind of then it started a Monday thing once a month, and I've pushed it so it's like basically it's having, frankly, if you have at least one other person that is also willing to do this stuff with you, then that's okay. Because 2 people, I mean, that is the beginnings of a group. And yeah, it depends on your travel time. Maybe if there's 2 people and that's all there is, you go out, you're in the pub, you're like, oh, this is a bit disappointing, it's only 2 of us. But you can still make that work, do you know what I mean? You can still make games designed for 2 people. It's just, what are the opportunities in your life? Design games for those opportunities. If your opportunities to play are people who don't play many other games, do what Michael did and make Lords of Waterdeep, but simpler. Do something else. If your opportunities are like, oh, we always play with 10 people, but it's only at parties, and we are only, then, you know, try to think of games that are for tens of people but last 5 minutes. And maybe you'll think of something, give yourself these restrictions. And I mean, this seems kind of blasé because I am coming from a very, very privileged position in that I'm in a country where there were a system which I was getting until August. But when I did my first Kickstarter job, and I was, kind of working with animals, cutting them up. I was like a butcher and fishmonger, which wasn't the nicest job. It's not something I ever planned to do for very long, to be honest, but it was marginally more interesting than just scanning things all day, which is what I did directly before. But at least on the upside, my job gave me mental energy to be able to think of other things and game designs occasionally while I was cycling to and from work. And that's like a 1-hour commute. Sometimes I'd have podcasts on, sometimes I'd deliberately turn that off just so I'm thinking about other things. And sometimes even with the podcasts, I'm kind of, oh, what they're saying, that's inspired a thing, and I'm going to kind of try and play that out in my mind. And it's like, wow, it's, I don't know, it's difficult for everyone. And there's a really good, I mean, I hope it's all okay to plug other podcasts and stuff here. Like,
For sure.
there's a Board Game Design Lab podcast with Carla, and Carla, I can't remember her surname, but yeah, she's all about time management and basically saying, yeah, you've got to have this priority list being like, this is the stuff I've got done. Sometimes you've just not got any energy. Do the stuff that really needs to be done, like cutting out stuff or just in stuff, or sometimes you've got more creative energy and then think of the new cards. And it's just about seizing the moments when you can, even if it's like 5 minutes in a queue. Just like when you are standing in a queue, if you've got like that time for 5 minutes, just don't just think about a design thing, and but you can only do as much as you can do, and don't beat yourself up about not being able to do more.
Right. So I think that was the Board Game Design Lab episode with Carla Kopp. Was that it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. From Weird Giraffe Games.
Yes.
Very cool. Michael, let's come back to you. I wanted to ask you about Kickstarter specifically, not necessarily your Kickstarter. Well, your Kickstarter is awesome. We'll actually show it right on the screen in a second. But just the act of kickstarting and how much stress it is. Like, I personally find it super stressful, and I'm not even the one who ever runs a Kickstarter. But what do you think about the emotional stress that a Kickstarter incites?
Oh my gosh.
Is that a healthy thing? Is that a good thing? What do you think?
So the first Kickstarter I ran was with gaming paper for Tattoo the Game of Ink last August. By day 2, I knew it had failed. It was at about 10%, ended up around, I think, 20%, if I remember correctly. But I knew it had failed, and that kind of really was almost less stressful than having one that's close to succeeding. Simply because, like, I'm pushing. I know what I have to do. I know where I have to be to get the game out in front of people. I know what I have to do to get people interested. I know how to pitch it. And I think having that much forethought and that much like planning and that much pressure weighing on me. Oh, did that just move? I think someone just backed.
It might have. That's awesome.
He's watching it live. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think someone just backed. Thank you, whoever you are. So the stress of running a Kickstarter that's successful and that I know I can still fulfill, even if it does succeed wildly, I think it's definitely like, it's thrilling in the truest sense of the word. It is like jumping out of a plane. You've got your parachute, but you're still in free fall for a while.
Right. That's a good analogy. I like that.
And you're just praying that that parachute does work. But in the meantime, you're literally hurtling towards the ground, and like, I have a major fear of falling. Like, that is just something. I don't bicycle even, like, because I don't want to fall. And so it's something that's like so exhilarating, the wind in your face, but on the other hand, there's a kind of a ground coming towards you. So it's like, you've got to do something, but like, man, you're in this moment, and then it's still going, and then I've got 20 days until that ground hits. So just hoping the parachute works.
Yeah. Can I ask you a follow-up question quickly, Michael?
Of course.
And it's actually based on the failure part of it. I wanted to know from you, is getting failure from a Kickstarter almost more validating than having like other people in your life tell you that the game is not going well?
So the game actually was great. People loved it. I had brought it to a lot of playtesting meetups and stuff in the Boston area, and people liked it. They loved the idea of a tattoo game. They loved the art, but the logistics were the problem in that case. So it was more like, how do you get over the shipping? How do you get over just these little mechanical details that make it so that you can't ship this game? And I learned all of that within a week of the Kickstarter launching, because I went to Gen Con. And people like JR Honeycutt were just so invaluable in helping me like find out how to turn that failure into knowledge for the next one.
That's interesting. That is one thing that this collective of us are, you know, if nothing else, we're very supportive of each other because we want to.
Yeah, and I really have appreciated that always. I mean, the first time I went to Gen Con was helping out Chris Cieslik from Asmati Games demoing, and from there I met Gaming Paper, who immediately fell in love with Tattoo and showed it to all their friends and brought it to the Paizo like freelancer meetup dinner, and like it's so supportive, the gaming community, and that's really what got me into games, bringing it back around, that I wanted to give back.
Very nice, very nice. Erica.
Yeah, I was gonna throw our last question over to Bez. So I'm really curious, what's the future going to be looking like for you? What are your hopes for the future?
Well, I'm hoping that Yogi, the physical contortion games that I mentioned, which is coming out by Gigamic, it's doing fairly well. So, I mean, it's not going to make me rich by any means, but I'm hoping it'll kind of give me, you know, ease off some of the financial stress, if you know what I mean. But then that's going to give me the room and the privilege to be able to work on other things. And I've got an idea for mini missions which minimize misery, which is kind of a deck of cards where each card is a different thing you've got to do. And so it's things like, oh, go up and say hello to like 2 people you've never met before, or
Like a blind social game sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of, and just, or even things that you don't need to do with anyone else. Like a card might be, have a spoon of 2 spices mixed together and think about it, and just kind of, what's the word? Kind of
experiences, I guess.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like sometimes, I mean, if you have a 1 out of 10 day, it's not going to stop you from having a really bad day. But let's say you've got like a, you know, a little bit of a bad day. Maybe it's like going to be a 3.5 out of 10. But then you've been doing these little kind of things. I mean, if you are the kind of person who's sometimes like a little bit down, then the games might be like, oh, you've done this thing in the morning. You feel a bit better about yourself. You've done this thing. It's like, oh, it's made you a little bit mindful. And then instead of 3.5, maybe it's only 4 out of 10. So it's a little bit better than it would have otherwise been. And I think ultimately what I kind of, as a company motto, I mean, what I want to do is like kind of just to maximize the amount of fun that people in the world are having with my stuff. And it's like kind of, yeah, that kind of seems to be the best way to explain it. And for the future, it's like just, yeah, trying to make, if exploring a bit what games can do, and if games can eventually, like, they can make you think about things in new ways. And I think that's amazing. But from a personal point of view, I mean, just to mirror what Michael said, and it's an amazing GOPR community. It's like small, everyone's awesome, and it's small enough that everyone's cool to each other and no one's a dick. And, well, few people are a dick. Like, there's...
But it's not the majority.
Exactly. And, you know, no one's in here, well, practically no one's in here to get actually rich, if you know what I mean. I mean, certainly not in the people that you see at Tessen, really. I mean, okay, maybe, you know what I mean. It's small enough that people are genuinely excited about, okay, we've got a game which this is only ever going to sell like 100 copies or 1,000 copies maximum, and still about just seeing what games can do and making things that improve everyone's kinds of life and happiness. And you go for it, Michael.
Yeah, so just on that idea of everyone being excited for each other, I mean, everyone keeps saying to me, and I've finally learned to accept this, even though there are these giant Kickstarters that seem to be like pushing out the little guy, a rising tide raises all ships. So everyone contributing games, everyone making games, everyone developing and designing and being inspired by games, all it can do is help the industry and the community.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to ask Michael your last question, or my last question to you, is can you tell me one strategy or technique that you would recommend to other people who may have, issues with mental health, issues with social skills, communication, that kind of thing? If they want to be part of this industry, what is the one thing they need to do first and foremost, do you think?
Listen. Don't
Awesome.
talk, listen, because just even before you form your own opinions, you've got to know what's happening, both in terms of the games that are out there and the industry trends, but also how do people interact in this industry? Go to a convention and just watch the designers talk to each other, because if you go up to a designer and make a total jerk of yourself, like, that will be remembered more than anything. But also, like, you should be passionate about the games. You should be supportive of others' games. You should be just remembering that rising tide piece, because we're all gamers, and just trashing other people's games or trashing each other's design skills doesn't help anyone.
Good point. Good point.
And
Ben.
what Michael said about listening, I mean, if you're watching this, you're probably already in that mindset of just listening and exploring what's out there. So, but it's at the same time, don't be afraid to just put your work forwards and show the world what you've got. And it's just like, it's such a supportive community. Don't be afraid to get involved. And whether you want to make a small thing, even if it's terrible, maybe that's going to help someone else. Like, I mean, In a Bind and Yogi would not exist if it weren't for Danish Frank, who's like this shadowy figure that has totally escaped from my life, and I no way to contact him now because I've emailed him. But like, it's like your actions have repercussions, and whether you bring negative things into the world or positive things into the world, and even when you are feeling quite low, you can do such wonderful things. But at the same time, you've got to watch out for yourself and self-care, but just do what you can and don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because you're awesome.
Excellent. Way to end that, Bez. That's great. I wanted just to give 5 seconds to our next show, sorry. Next show, November 8th, 2017, episode 118, will be Shameless Plug, Designing Sex-Positive Games. We're going to have Naomi Clark, who is the designer behind Consenticles, which was on Kickstarter a little while ago. It's the game about communication, about consent between aliens and humans. And then, obviously, Matt Fantastic will be here,
yes, of course,
to talk about sex-positive games. And so that's next week's episode. It'll be really interesting. It's something I'm very positive about, very interested in learning more about their takes on that field. And Daryl's going to wrap the show in 2, 3, 1, go, Daryl.
Oh man, I gotta talk to Matt Fantastic more. I just spent the weekend with that guy. No, I love Matt Fantastic. It's gonna be a really fantastic show. But before
was that
we
intentional?
go,
Did you say that intentionally?
it's like the positive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before that, I just want to give a couple plugs. Shameless plug. Speakeasy Blues. Don't buy it for me. Buy it for Adrian. He's an excellent co-designer, and that's from Artana. We're currently on Speakeasy. We already talked about Pigment. Please support that on Kickstarter. And then also a friend of ours, Evan Derrick. He's got a wonderful game, Detective City of Angels, that Sen and I have got to play test the last couple of years. Really excited about this one for Van Ryder Games. It's done crazy well. So as you know, Michael was talking about, and how all of us talk about how these big Kickstarters feel like they're, but still, even the little guys can have a blowaway hit. So something like this from Van Ryder Games, please support them. They only have a day left, and we're really excited to see a friend of the show doing so well.
If you wonder who Evan is, Evan's the guy who made us read out our ones.
Oh yeah,
feedback.
We need to get him back on, and we'll do another one episode.
I think you know what? I think January 1st is a good day to do that.
Yeah, we'll do that and mentally prepare ourselves
for the new year.
Get ourselves prepared for maybe some harsh critics.
Can I not do that?
We don't want to trigger anyone, so you do not have to participate. We're not saying that everyone needs to do that. We're just, I don't know, gluttons for punishment or something like that.
Yeah.
So until then, I just want to encourage everyone out there, keep making games. We love meeting you and hearing about the games you're making. Use them however you want. If it's an expression of something you're passionate about, if it's a way to escape, if it is a way to make something that others can enjoy. Thank you so much to our guests, Bez and Michael, for inspiring and encouraging our listeners. And I know I'm inspired by it. And just everyone have a great night.
Excellent. Thanks very much. We'll see you all later. Bye.
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 Bye.